Welcome into the Sports Objective and our NCD1 baseball preview. It is game week, and we're wrapping up our preview as we have NC State and Western Carolina left to cover. And right now, very excited to be joined once again from Pack Pride, Cory Smith. Cory, we appreciate you coming back on.
Yes, sir. Love to do it as always, man.
Absolutely. And before we dive into this year, what a season it was a year ago for NC State. Started off 4-9 and 1-8 in the ACC, but got a big midweek win where they came back down at UNC Wilmington and then went to Boshamer Stadium and swept the Tar Heels, which is something that the Wolfpack fans obviously always enjoy. But that kind of flipped the season, and the Wolfpack really played well, 33-10 down the stretch, 18-6 in the ACC, and then it was just a shame what happened in Omaha.
Yeah, I mean, if you're looking back at last season, I think a lot of people will just kind of look at the finish and just say, hey, it was really unfortunate the way things went. But, the season as a whole was a roller coaster ride. As you said, started off the season really poorly, about as bad as you could. And I think a big part of that was because of the fact that you didn't really have any lead up. You didn't have any non-conference games, or a ton of them anyways. You had a couple midweek, but you didn't really have any series. They also had a team that they were playing had a COVID issue at the beginning of the season. I forget which team it was, but their opening series was called off. You go straight into ACC play. They get kind of, thrown into the fire. It didn't play well. And as you mentioned, you go to UNC, they swept that series. And that's when the switch flipped, or the flip switch for them going down the season. And you look at what they were able to do. And I think that's huge for going into this year. They lost a lot of players, but in particular, the pitching staff for NC State, Sam Highfill, Matt Willardson as that number 2 guy. They lose a guy on Reed Johnson, but the two of them, were probably two of the best starters for NC State down the stretch going into last year and heading into this year. And then Chris Villeman at the back end of that. So you lose a lot of guys, but having that type of pitching staff back from the way this team finished last season, gives this team a lot of confidence heading into the year.
Yeah, and just a couple more things regarding last season. You hear it all the time from coaches, especially in baseball. It's a marathon, not a sprint, and that couldn't have been any more true, like you said, about that 2021 NC State season. And it's pretty crazy, when you looked at it. Louisville had swept the Wolfpack in Raleigh, and then Louisville doesn't even make the tournament.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And and again, some of those teams that you were expecting to be, some of the stronger teams when NC State went up against them earlier on in the season, it didn't really pan out, but several of them did. I'm thinking back to, again, going back to that UNC series. UNC was ranked number 11 in the country at that time, and they ended up falling out. They did end up making the NCAA tournament, but definitely not quite as high as anybody thought at that time. And then, you win a series against Boston College at home or on the road, you sweep that series. The Notre Dame series, they lost 2 of them, but that was a series, a team that really held up. Virginia Tech, Wake Forest, all those different teams, kind of in and out of the rankings throughout the year. And for NC State to win those series down the stretch, I think gave them a ton of confidence going into the NCAA tournament.
And then that Arkansas Super Regional, a lot of casual fans, they see a 21-2 score and they think, well, Arkansas is going to punch his ticket for Omaha. And I don't know, just kind of having a feeling the way NC State had played down the stretch. I said, don't write the Wolfpack off just yet. And they won 2 thrillers in games 2 and 3 of that Super Regional.
Yeah, and again, a big part of that was the performances of Sam Highfill and Matt Willardson. We talked a lot over the last several years about Reed Johnson and the stability that he brought to this team. But, there was a lot of games, unfortunately for him, where he just didn't play particularly well. And that happened to be one of them in that Super Regional, that Friday game. And then, I'm looking back at the stats now. Sam Highfill gets the win in that second game. Evan Justice plays really well down the stretch. He gets a save for NC State, but only 2 runs given up over the first 6 innings, and that's all on Sam Highfill. The second game of that series, NC State wins 6-5. only the 3 runs that were given up late in the game happened to be off the bullpen. So for NC State to win that game and then, go into the next day, they pretty much pitch with like 5, maybe 6 pitchers down the stretch in that in just about the entire NCAA tournament. And a lot of that had to do with the fact they just didn't have, a ton of arms in the bullpen because of either injuries or simply just, having to lean on other guys that they had throughout the year. And that's, I think, the biggest question mark for this team going into this year is how good can the bullpen be? They get a lot of guys back that, they were missing this past season. But, they're still going to have to answer those questions early on in the season. And that's really where this team struggled at the beginning of last year. So if there's a reason for, concern, that I think continues to be it. I think they feel good about a lot of the players. They've kind of plugged into those holes when it comes to, the lineup. But, that bullpen is still kind of a question mark going into the year.
Yeah, you mentioned things positionally. 8 guys drafted a year ago, and I think at least 5 of those were position players and designated hitter. So just talk about, take us around the horn. Let's start off with the infield. I know one of the guys you returned there is Link Jarrett's son, JT. Obviously, Link being the head coach at Notre Dame.
Yeah, JT's been, defensively one of the best players for NC State over the years, typically playing second base for NC State. So they feel good about him there. And the biggest thing for him is really the bat. We saw him play well in the ACC tournament late last year. We've seen him step up at times when it comes to, his bat, but typically he's been around that 7, 8, 9 slot in the lineup. So you're not expecting a ton from him with the bat, but we'll see, how well he's developed this offseason. The other guy, in the infield to know as of right now, that's really it. In terms of returning players, that's really it. But there's going to be a lot of movement around this infield. Lou James Groover, Gio is as he goes by, is a name to know that transferred in from Charlotte. Josh Hood, who transferred in from Penn. And then Peyton Green is a true freshman for this team that, from everything we've been told, will probably slot in as a starter at shortstop. And then if we're still talking infield here, Jacob Cozart is kind of the guy that we've heard throughout the offseason will be taking that catcher spot after you lose a guy. For several years, NC State has typically had strong catchers, but he'll come in and they expect him to be the starter there. And then, as well in the infield too, one guy that I don't want to forget here that we've talked a lot about this offseason is a guy in Tommy White, 6 foot, 242 pounds. He's a big dude, has a big bat. Originally from North Carolina, played his last year of high school baseball at IMG Academy. But he comes in. He was kind of looked at as, a potential day 1, day 2 draft pick this past year. But, once teams started figuring out, hey, he's going to go to college, he's going to go play regardless of where he's drafted, he wasn't seen as that anymore. So he comes to NC State with some pretty high expectations on his shoulders. Between him, Peyton Green, and Jacob Cozart, Elliot Even talked about it last week, and he kind of compared it a little bit, maybe not a direct comparison to that year they brought in Carlos Rodon, Trey Turner, and Brett Austin, and several other guys that really panned out for that team too. But that's kind of what the talk is now is having potential of 3 freshmen really stepping into those roles and being asked to produce a lot for this team. Will it pan out? We'll see. But they have a lot of transfers that are coming in to kind of add some depth to those spots too.
If you would tell us about the outfield, what returns, and then what does Coach Avent and staff have coming in?
Yeah, as far as the returning production for this team, when it comes to the outfield, it's really Devontae Brown as of right now. Devontae Brown, 2 guys that those are the 2 guys right now in terms of the returners is Devontae Brown, JT Jarrett. We've heard a lot about his bat, how he's developed this offseason. Back in 2020, he was off to an extremely hot start. By far the best hitter on this team early on. And, it didn't really pan out early on last season for NC State, for Devontae Brown. we saw him kind of step in and become a better hitter down the stretch. Really, I mean, I think back to that the Ruston Regional last year against Louisiana Tech. He was named the MVP from that series, and a big reason why was because of his bat. He's made some really big defensive plays for this team. You think back to the World Series last year; he had a really big catch, and that win against Vanderbilt before the Pac-13 and everything happened there. But he's been a guy that we've heard a lot about. Another one too, Noah Souls, I think is somebody that not a ton of people are talking about, but has a chance to produce. Dominic Pololi is a guy. Dom Pololi is his name. That comes again, another player that comes over from Charlotte. I've heard a lot about him and his potential too. He was a player that won Player of the Week several times for Charlotte before he came in to the system. Another player that ECU fans on that side might remember is Trey Truitt. He had to sit out last year due to NCAA rules, but he's there's talk of him having a potential role. Another guy is Chase Nixon, the son of Trot. He has a chance to step in and potentially play. But then there's a lot of other guys that, again, we've talked about the infield a little bit, but there's some guys that have some versatility there that could step into those roles too. So there's not a ton of outfielders on this roster, but there's several guys that are looking to try to take over those roles.
I know earlier you mentioned Sam Heifel. If you would tell us about the rest of the rotation and how things are shaking out, and then address the bullpen. You've already done so in general terms, but tell us some of those specific arms that you expect to be key cogs.
Yeah, the other guy in that 1-2 punch, and we'll have a story actually right before the season starts on these two guys. But Sam Heifel being the probably the Friday starter, Matt Willitson. It'll be interesting to see where they put him in all of this. Do they put him on Saturday to try to go ahead and win series, or do they put him on Sunday and try to have a bridge in between there, because Sunday is where he's been most comfortable? I don't know exactly how Elliot Avon is planning on doing it. We asked him about it last week, and he didn't give us a direct answer. The third guy in that starting rotation, if I'm handicapping it right now, I'm probably going with David Harrison, a guy who's been that Sunday starter before. He's also been a midweek starter at times too, depending on where his stuff is at. But he's a veteran, a guy that's been on this team for several years, so I get the feeling he'll get kind of the first crack at that. He missed a good portion of last season because of some off-the-field troubles, but it wasn't stuff that directly correlated with him. So, he was just kind of caught up in some off-season stuff that happened. So I expect to see him, come back and be a potential guy in that third rotational spot. Chris Villeman was somebody that heading into the offseason, a lot of people kind of thought, he'll be the third guy in that rotation. He'll be the guy that comes in. But, from everything we've heard, it sounds like he's probably expected to be the closer for this team, which I think is a role that suits him. He's somebody that can pitch several innings. And I think, as we saw late last season, he kind of stepped up into that late rotation role. If Matt Willitson didn't pitch particularly well, he was able to take over the 5th, 6th, 7th innings and bridge that gap to somebody else. But I think he'll step into that closer role this year. They get a lot of arms back from last year. They didn't have. Baker Nelson is a big name to know. Carson Kelly is somebody that we've heard a lot about as a freshman stepping up. Tristan Sipple comes back. Logan Whitaker. All of these guys have a chance to produce for this team. And Garrett Payne is another name. We haven't heard a ton about him this offseason, but he was somebody that was part of that Pac-13 team last year. He pitched really, really well in Omaha. 6'7" kid, really long, lanky, has a lot of life on his fastball. So, he's somebody that I think could step up into that role. So there's a lot of guys up and down this roster. I forgot about Cooper King entirely too, and John Morelia too. Those are two guys that haven't had a lot of time to be able to pitch so far, but we'll see exactly what they're capable of this year too.
A couple more things for you, Cory. Taking a look at the schedule, not surprisingly, the Wolfpack play 14 out of their first 16 games at home, beginning with a 3-game series this weekend against the Evansville Purple Aces. starting on Friday afternoon, weather permitting. And then also you get your ACC opener, that series with Notre Dame at Doak Field.
Oh, I lost you, man.
Did you catch any of that?
Yeah, I caught. Well, you got all the way. I heard all the way until the home opener against Notre Dame.
Yeah,
Yeah.
just 14 out of the first 16 there at Doak Field. Um, you have the 3-game series against Notre Dame to open ACC play at home as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think the very beginning of the season for NC State is a good opportunity to stack some wins, get some confidence. We talked about it earlier. The slow start that they got off to last season, that's not necessarily the case here. But I do think some of these series are a little bit more surprising. I think Evansville has a chance to. They bring some experience back, so that should be a good test for this team. I think they still sweep the series, but again, a tough test for them. Quinnipiac is a team that we don't really know a whole lot about, but Northeastern, that third series is a real tough test for NC State and for really any team across the country. Northeastern is a team that made the NCAA tournament last year, has a chance to return a lot of depth pieces from last year, and really challenge any team in the country. So that should be an interesting series right before they get to Notre Dame. Notre Dame, as you mentioned earlier, Link Jarrett, the type of team that he's put together over the years. They got to, if I remember correctly, the Super Regionals last year, didn't advance to the College World Series, but they have a really strong team coming back too. JT Jarrett welcoming his dad back home, so that'll always be a fun series. NC State lost 2 of those games last year, but that was during the comeback that they were making. So they won 1 of those games, but that's going to be a good opportunity for NC State to kind of set the tone before they go to Florida State the following week, and then in between all of that, after the Georgia Tech series at home, they'll go to ECU. So all of those, I mean, we're talking about, these are all like very early in March. So we're just a couple weeks away from all these series really starting, and that's how quickly this will fire up in the ACC.
And with all the success that Coach Avent and this program has had, obviously you're always trying to stay ahead in the arms race. And I know there's some renovations and so forth taking place at Doak Field over the coming months and years. So just talk about that, what all is being done, both to the stadium in terms of seating capacity, upgrades, and so forth.
Yeah, well, they haven't said anything about the seating capacity yet or any upgrades there. As of right now, they've shown the plans. There hasn't been anything official that's come out. As of right now, the plan is for a close to $15 million project that they're going to be completing. The plan is to start it after the conclusion of this season. So basically, working on fundraising, working on getting plans together for that. But everything that I've been told, and we've kind of seen it on the plans, is it's going to upgrade the overall look of Doak Field from the outset, from a fan perspective, and more than likely increase capacity too, and add some more some nicer assets to the look of the field. But the biggest thing that they're trying to do right now is really upgrade everything behind the scenes for the players and for the program, and that's been what's been the priority, because for Elliott Avent for several years now, he's been talking about, hey, we really want to upgrade the actual facilities and upgrade everything for the players to be able to recruit the way that they want to recruit and bring in players. But that's been kind of the priority this time around. They still want to upgrade everything across the stadium and everything like that, but the biggest thing has been making the player experience that much better too.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And Cory, as always, we appreciate your time. But before we wrap it up, tell folks how they can follow your work there at Pack Pride.
Yeah, as always, you guys can check it out at packpride.com, or you can go follow us at Pack Pride on Twitter, or myself, R. Cory Smith. There's no E. So at R. Cory Smith on Twitter to follow along.
Appreciate that. Yeah, I double checked to make sure there was no E before I put that graphic on the screen, so I get that right. But Really appreciate your time, and appreciate everyone tuning in. And we've in the open, I referenced 17 Division One baseball programs around the state of North Carolina. We've caught up with someone from every program. Primarily, it's been head coaches, but some beat writers, play-by-play voices, so on and so forth. Trying to catch up with Western Carolina's head coach, Bobby Miranda, between now and opening day. Hopefully, we'll be able to get that done. But if you're a college baseball fan, a lot of overlap with the midweek games. So if you would like to, get a preview of one of those other in-state teams, definitely check out our NCD1 baseball preview. We have all these 16 interviews now compiled into a playlist that makes them easy to find. Just search the Sports Objective on YouTube, and you can find all of these interviews as well as our other content. But for Cory Smith, I'm Bubba Rosenbaum. You've been watching and listening to the NCD1 baseball preview on the Sports Objective. Take care, everyone.